Good morning and welcome to the weekly review, the show where we review the week in education. I'm back in front of the camera, having spent the last couple of reviews on the back of the camera. And joining me to review the news of education this week is the returning Lucy Lieberger and the near ever-present John Gibbs. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you today where we're talking, it's quite a technocratic episode, I feel, today. In that there have been some really big stories in education over the last week, which we've covered on TTR through other shows and other podcasts. And you can catch up with all of those on our website, ttradio.org/listen back. And today we're going to focus on three stories which may not have been as prominent in the world of education. We're going to start with the news that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has appointed Maureen McKenna to join London's Violence Reduction Unit, with a view to reducing the number of school exclusions in the capital. McKenna joined Glasgow City Council in December 2007 as Director of Education and retired in January 22, a period when exclusions in Glasgow dropped by 93%, coinciding with a reported 50% reduction in violence. McKenna will help in the development of a London Inclusion Charter, which celebrates inclusion and recognises that reducing all forms of exclusion must go hand in hand with increasing young people's sense of belonging and feelings of safety. The Violence Reduction Unit states that while less than 1 in 200 children in the UK are permanently excluded from school, almost 1 in 2 of the country's prison population were excluded as children. McKenna's appointment was praised by former Children's Commissioner and TTR guest Anne Longfield, who said that she worked with schools to almost wipe out exclusions in Glasgow pre-COVID in a straightforward, no-nonsense way. But the DfE's behaviour advisor Tom Bennett called it an extraordinarily inept decision. Sadly, the Glasgow example is not one any authority should wish to emulate. Now, John, it's not as binary as what Anne and Tom are saying, but if you did have to fall into one camp, where would you be on McKenna's appointment?
I wouldn't be against it on the grounds that exclusions are always a kind of failure. When a student is excluded from school, and it shouldn't be a kind of failure, it should be a different path. In our current climate, where we are now with schools and lack of resources and so on, it's a disgrace that there's a connection, and a very provable connection, between knife crime, violence, prison population, and exclusions. I mean, what does that say about us? I mean,
but I think back here, John, to my A-level maths classes and my statistics teacher's favourite phrase: correlation does not necessarily imply causation here. And people in education talk about this school to prison pipeline, where people have been excluded from school and end up falling into gang culture and violence and knife crime in prison. But is there really a causal link saying that, well, actually, if you're excluded, you end up there, rather than actually there's wider contributing factors? It's like the number of ice cream sales in August closely correlates with the number of shark attacks, because it's warmer, and so people are buying more ice cream and people are swimming in the sea. So does correlation really imply causation here, John?
No, correlation doesn't. Well, correlation can imply causation. Yes, it can. If you have a sensible possibility, and as a society, there is a sensible possibility. The literacy rates among prisoners is extraordinarily low. The high levels of drug addiction, extremely high. Mental illness among prisoners, and so on. So there's probably a correlation between healthcare, mental health provision, the way we deal with drugs in this country, and education and prisons. But when I say probably, I'm with you, Tom. Of course, yeah, I don't know. Out there, researchers do that, but the researchers do suggest that there is a believable and very sensible correlation. So I guess it's a sensible correlation. Mm-hmm. But I don't. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say Glasgow has cut permanent exclusions by 93%. But if we look at this example here from Bannerman High School in Glasgow very recently, the exclusions might have dropped, Lucy, but the behaviour hasn't really gone away, has it? And there hasn't really been a drop in permanent exclusions because behaviour's improved. There's been a drop in permanent exclusions because the council has decided that schools should exclude less. So might it be better for Sadiq Khan to look at ways of improving behaviour rather than looking at ways of reducing exclusions, Lucy?
Yes, and also I think, I mean, yes, we need to reduce exclusions. Yes, that's important, but I feel like this is one of the things that's kind of the latest obsession, latest of many obsessions in education. And suddenly it's kind of, yes, but what about teacher safety? What about, yes, you can reduce all these exclusions, and yes, you can still have these children in school, but then you've got situations where teachers aren't feeling safe in their own classrooms. Does it mean that, you know, you should be kind of having a zero tolerance, and that these children should just be sent away from school? No, it's difficult, and I do think there does need to be a major crackdown on behavior. We've looked at this in terms of vaping in toilets and things like that. It begins with looking harder at behavior from primary up, because it doesn't just, children don't just turn up at secondary school and suddenly start behaving badly. This is something that is something that starts when they are younger, but also you need to look into why it's happening, what's happening with that as well. So I do think that employing someone to, or hiring someone to reduce exclusions is in principle not a bad idea, but the focus needs to be a bit wider. Rather than just, we need to reduce exclusions.
If we look at the statistics, these have been provided by Andrew Old from Twitter, so thank you to Andrew. We can see that the exclusion rate for inner London is lower than any other region in the country. And I've been told that the South East is only so low because head teachers in that region are under pressure not to exclude already. So, John, I'll let you come back to what Lucy has said there about the exclusions versus improving behaviour, but also about this here. And so London's already excluding at a far lower rate. So, and Sadiq Khan, as Mayor of London, wants to drive down exclusions. But should he not celebrate actually the high levels of success here for reducing exclusions in London compared to the rest of the country?
Well, yeah, but if we're going to celebrate, if we're going to say that's a good thing. Well done, Sadiq. The London is doing well for reducing exclusion. We're saying something about what we think about exclusions. We should be reducing exclusion. So, Lucy, I'll be totally agree with Lucy that in principle, anyone says, well, I'm going to appoint someone in charge of reducing exclusions. That can't be a bad thing. But it's within the context of what disruptive students do to school. We know that. Goodness me. I've been in schools where the ripple of relief goes around the staff room as the word gets out that a certain student's been excluded. When you know that it's someone else's problem now, out of sight, out of mind, all that stuff, but at least they won't be in your classroom. It's extraordinarily disruptive. And of course, the safety of teachers and so on. You can't simply reduce exclusions by saying, don't exclude. That's the end of that, And you can't, on the other hand, you can't simply push kids out onto the streets.
No.
And so it's an indictment of our society, really, that there are high levels of exclusion and we don't deal with it properly.
It's also worth noting, of course, and those who are politically attuned will be aware of this, that education policy in Scotland is devolved to the Scottish Government, but education policy in London is not devolved to a Mayor of London, and therefore McKenna will probably not be able to have the same impact in terms of influencing education and education policy that she has had in Glasgow, where devolution has gone further than it has in London. It's also worth noting that the fall in knife crime and youth violence in Glasgow under McKenna matches the rate in the rest of Scotland. And in fact, knife crime and youth violence, or reported crime, as we should always say, has fallen more in England than in Scotland over the same period. So it's a really interesting discussion, and one we'll probably be talking much more about when we see the impact of Maureen McKenna's work. It's a good time for me to say that Teachers Talk Radio is brought to you in association with Pearson Edexcel. Their new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students, and that's really important, all students to showcase their language skills through inclusive and relatable content. I really enjoyed listening to Darren Lester's free shows for Teachers Talk Talk Radio with Pearson Edexcel, talking about the importance of making MFL accessible to students who may not be able to afford a foreign holiday every year. The new Pearson MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. So why not find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL. Now, research from the Local Government Association demonstrating that council-maintained schools in England are outperforming academies has come under fire from the academies sector for allegedly misrepresenting data and lacking nuance. The LGA claimed that 93% of council-maintained schools were rated outstanding or good, compared to 87% of academies. And furthermore, while 57% of academies managed to improve standards from inadequate or requires improvement to good or outstanding from August 2018, the figure was 73% for council-maintained schools. These are very impressive statistics, but the CEO of the Confederation of School Trusts, Laura Crudders, has said that the report is incredibly misleading. For several years, schools receiving the lowest Ofsted ratings have automatically become academies, so it's hardly a surprise that there are fewer of these now overseen by councils. And her deputy, Steve Rollett, said that since council-maintained schools are forced to join an academy having been graded inadequate, the council sector has been left with an unrepresentative and incomparable body of schools. Now, these inadequate schools, or so-called inadequate schools known as sponsored academies, have improved sharply when taken out of council control. Between 2018 and 2023, there was a 14 percentage point rise in the proportion of sponsored academies rated good or outstanding, compared to a 4 percentage point rise for council-maintained schools. Now, looking at all of this, Lucy, isn't it just simply the case that you've got different people in different sectors who are taking what they want from this report and singing their own praises, and actually we're not really going to learn anything about school improvement from this. It's just people taking what they want and singing their praises.
I mean, when I looked at all of this, I just thought, kind of whoop-de-doo. I don't know what you're getting at here, particularly in the wake of everything we have learned and seen about Ofsted this year. It's sort of, well, we know that these one-word ratings that we come out with are absolute nonsense anyway, based on, well, sometimes very flawed inspections. So I don't know what you want us to do with this information. It's kind of, okay, now what? I don't really sort of see what the point was. It's everyone going, look at us, look, we're doing better, and it's just a bit of kind of, I don't even know what to call it. Sort of looky over here, no, I'm doing better, and it's kind of, well, are you really? When you unpack those statistics further, what are you doing better at? Where can we learn from each other here? Can we help each other out here? Well, no, we're just kind of trying. It's almost kind of splitting them up more, saying, right, we're over here and we're over here. And I don't really have much else to say on it, to be honest.
That's okay, Lucy. I'm going to go to John now. One of the government's big policies of the last 13 years, launched by Gove and carried on by successive education secretaries, was academisation. And in some cases, schools graded inadequate by Ofsted being forced into becoming academies. If that policy were to be successful, we would see statistics for academies far outstripping that of local authority schools, but we don't see that. We see actually multiple ways of interpreting the same data. So can we really say, John, that forced academisation has really improved schools?
Definitely not. Absolutely. That's what you can say. You can say that you can't say something. and that's actually a very important thing, because as you absolutely said it, Tom, spot on. These were the answer to something. This was the big idea. This was the big idea under Blair, big idea under Gove. These were going to be bold. They're going to transform schools. That the statistics don't come up with conclusive evidence that they work says an awful lot. It was, and let's be clear about this, it was always a political decision. And people looking at these statistics, depending on their politics, will say things like, well, that proves what I've always believed, and so on. And what you believe, you'll tend to impose on it. On these, as Lucy points out, meaningless statistics, really. Except their meaning is what they don't show. They don't show that academies work, and academies don't work, or at least they don't work the way they were supposed to work. Or if they don't work, we can't. If they do work, we can't prove it. So, goodness me, if someone were visiting from another planet, that old thing, and they looked at schools and how you run them, they'd say, well, aren't your schools democratically accountable in some way to the people in the area that use them? Well, that's what most countries do, isn't it? That seems to be the most sensible idea. Market forces, turning schools into academies, run by the good, the bad, and the ugly. Anyone who turns up really can run a school these days, and it's absolutely absurd. I'm quite pleased it doesn't work. I want to, please show me some really believable statistics that show that academies really are awful. I'd love that.
Sitting on the fence there, John, as always. Thank you. I want to just go to a point that Lucy made about the unreliability of Ofsted judgments for evaluating school improvement and school performance, because anybody who's been through Ofsted, particularly under the new framework, knows that actually the inspections are particularly unreliable and invalid in many cases, and we've seen cases of maintained schools which have been graded inadequate rather unfairly because Ofsted's turned around and come back in a few months' time and changed their mind. So if we can't really use Ofsted judgments to evaluate school improvement over a number of years, what other methods can we use? Are we back to using Progress 8 or something else? I'm going to open that one up to either of you there.
Oh, gosh, I mean, we know that Ofsted needs to be, I mean, I know some people want it gone altogether, but I'm going to, for the sake of trying to give you a reasonably articulate answer, say it was reformed, that needs to happen first before we can then start seeing, start doing all these comparing things, start having a legitimate way to actually compare these schools, if that's what we feel we need to do, and then go again. But without a robust system of being able to do that, we can't. You end up with reports like this that mean precisely nothing.
John, any ideas?
Well, how difficult can it be to inspect a school? If you go into a school, you walk around, you probably get an idea of what it's like initially, an impression of the kind of environment. And you do that a lot, and you're an experienced inspector and so on. Inspecting schools shouldn't be a mysterious art, and it shouldn't be involved in arbitrary data statistical levels. Progress 8, no one understands that. I don't understand Progress 8. I don't think anyone actually understands it. I'd love someone to explain Progress 8 to me. I don't think the people who do it understand it. I also don't think that any level that you give to a school is always subjective and arbitrary and open to challenge and doesn't see the whole picture. But you could just put sensible inspection regimes that come up with ideas for improvement and criticisms that are valid. Well, that seems to be the way the world should work, and could very easily. Maybe the way it was done once, until we were obsessed by the idea of comparing schools and creating a market for schools.
Well, Ofsted has told us in the past that it's not a force for school improvement. So perhaps making it a force for school improvement might be a good idea. Yes. I should say a very warm welcome to all of our listeners today to a weekly review on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and everywhere else. And if you're not already subscribing to Teachers Talk Radio, follow us on Twitter at TT Radio Official. And also you can subscribe to our website, ttradio.org. Time for our final story of the day. And here's one to make you feel inadequate. A 32-year-old former head teacher and schools advisor to 5 education secretaries has submitted his application to be the Conservative Party candidate for Norwich South at the next general election. Labour currently has a majority in Norwich South of nearly 13,000, so he's unlikely to win. And it sparks speculation that Thomas may well be using this as an electioneering experience before being parachuted into a safer seat at the following election. Thomas co-founded Open National Academy, for which he was awarded an OBE for services to education, and he left the DFE in May 2023 to become the chief executive of a mathematics charity. He'd previously been regional director at the Australia Academies Trust and strategy director at Inspiration Trust. Thomas achieved a double first in PPE at Exeter College, Oxford, then trained through Teach First from 2011, working for the next 4 years as a senior leader at Westminster Academy until 2015, when he left teaching to join the McKinsey consultancy firm as an engagement manager. In January 2018, he rejoined the education profession, being appointed head teacher at Jane Austen College at the age of 26 or 27. It's an impressive CV, isn't it, Lucy? How do you feel about this?
I mean, it is an impressive CV, but I mean, anyone can talk a good game, can't they? I mean, it's you can't argue with that. And I think because maybe we do need somebody who is a bit fresher faced and a bit younger. Maybe with this obsession with the idea that he's only 32 is misplaced, because he's packed an awful lot into a very short space of time. I would almost be tempted to say, let's see what you've got. I mean, why not give it? I mean, setting aside who he's part of, but I think let him at it. If he's pulled all that off by the grand old age of 32, then maybe the only way for him is up, if you like. But I mean, when I initially heard that he was 32 years old, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm only a couple of years older and I haven't achieved anything like that. But I think we do get fixated on the wrong things. So maybe, maybe let's see what he can do.
It's worth noting that Tony Blair joined Parliament at the age of 30. So, it's not exactly unprecedented. Now, John, he's 32 years old. He's got that as a CV, but has he really been in a job long enough to demonstrate sustained impact? And advisor to 5 education secretaries sounds great until you realise just how long some of these education secretaries have served for. John,
what about that?
Oh yeah, there's no word in the English language. Probably Eskimos have got one. There's a proper word in the English language to describe the sort of sense of despair you have after years and years of grinding away in a school, when some very young person is appointed to a senior position in that same school. It's a mixture of jealousy, fear, despair, and so on. Anyway, but with this, so I don't really resent him being 32. Well, although I do feel that as a society we could honor gnarled old wisdom a bit more. The main thing is that CV. It's right. He skips and he jumps like running across a pond. Never stand on the stone too quickly that you're jumping across, in order that you might wobble and fall off. You move from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and the cliche of it: Oxford, PPE, then McKinsey, then out there into the world with a bit of stuff here, a bit of stuff there. Just don't hesitate too long in that one before before it falls down behind you. Move on to the next thing. And the Oak Academy is, wow, that was a surfboard he managed to have just in place. As the tidal wave of a lockdown came, wow, he caught a wave there and zoomed ahead and got the funding without proper tendering and so forth. Formed Oak Academy, then off from that idea, which is not a bad idea. I've looked at Oak Academy; it's all right. It's not a bad idea. It's not a brilliant idea. And then he's going to ride that. He's going to fail in Norwich, and then he's going to get a thing in Parliament, and will have skipped through. Teaching will always be and then they'll have the ghastly sort of experience of meeting him in years to come, and he'll say, well, I was a teacher, and he'll use that some sort of I gained some sort of moral, ethical advantage over you chaps on the backbenches who went to merchant banks. I taught. They'll all pause and go, yeah, you did.
But also a lot of Teach First, do go through they actually end up going down the corporate route as well. A lot of them do kind of, I think, because of the sponsorship that's, and I need to obviously be careful what I say, but of the sponsorships associated with Teach First, a lot of those graduates go on into corporate jobs rather than teaching jobs, or excel very quickly.
It is worth noting, of course, but while Teach First retention rates for teaching are much lower than other routes, we do have very high levels of dropout at the moment in all sectors as well. Because it's August and because it's the summer holidays, rather than doing our shows of a week, I'm going to give Lucy and John a little quiz to do. We've had 10 education secretaries since the Conservative Party came to power in 2010.
Oh.
No.
How many of them can you name?
Oh no! In 2010.
Shout one out when you've got one.
Gove.
Gove is one.
We've got Gillian at the moment. We've got
Gillian is 2.
Oh gosh.
You can play along at home if you like.
Gavin,
Gillian.
the ridiculous Gavin.
Williamson. You've got Gove, Keegan, and Williamson.
Gav. How could you forget Gav?
No, you can't. It's seared. In fact, you've made me remember that now.
Who was before Gillian?
He was some bloke. They're all anonymous.
That was about when Boris was on the way out.
Boris. I'm sure he must have.
Boris has done many things, but he's never been education secretary.
Nick,
I mean, Boris Johnson's education secretary. We'd have so much content on TTR, wouldn't we? Go on, Lucy.
Absolutely. It should have happened.
Still time.
Nick was a no, wasn't he? He wasn't.
Nick
Gibb has been schools minister since the dawn of time, but he's never quite been education secretary.
No, okay. Oh gosh, I'm really stuck now.
If you think you know, then tweet us or comment.
Yeah,
and help us.
I'm going to give
us a clue.
You've got both Keegan and Williamson. Are you bowing out at 3? You've got another 7.
No, we're not bowing out at 3. John, come on.
No, never. Oh, where's the Google?
Who was after Gove? Wore the nice shoes.
Wasn't no.
Wore the nice shoes. That's a clue, isn't it? Wore the nice shoes.
Oh, Nikki, what's her face?
Nikki, what's her face? She'll be delighted. She's a peer of Rome now.
I know she is, and I can't think of her surname.
She wore the nice shoes. Give us the first name there, Tom. Go on.
I'll put Nikki, and I'll give you half a point. You got 3.5.
Oh, what was Nikki's surname? I'm going to kick myself because I know it's something really not that.
Yeah. One of them was education secretary, went straight to being chancellor afterwards.
Straight to being chancellor.
I think found the T levels. Not Sunak.
I know.
Hunt's never been education secretary.
George Osborne was never education.
Osborne's never done it, no.
Went straight to being chancellor. Oh.
So he was a chancellor's.
I think you're going to have to bow out.
No, it's gone.
We're bowing out at 3.5.
I know.
3.5. Yeah, well,
I'll show you the answers. Are we ready? Here we go. We've got Michael
Gove, Morgan, Justin Greening,
then Damien Hines, Gavin Williamson, Nadeem
Zahari. Yes.
Michelle Donovan, who did 2 days. Then James Cleverly, Kit Malthouse again for Gillian Keegan. He did 49 days. Gillian Keegan's done 285 days and counting as education secretary. So she's only 8 days away from Nadeem Zahawi. And I didn't even need a double first from Oxford to tell you that one. But she's still... Go on, John.
Who can remember Kit Malthouse? I mean, he doesn't even remember he did it.
Well, Michelle didn't, Michelle was all but in name. I didn't remember.
She got a lovely payout for it.
Well, Michelle, yeah. That's ridiculous.
But when we talk about advisor to 5 education secretaries, I think we can tell which 5 we're probably talking about here. And I think that's the key point to be made about what John was saying about jumping around things. Anyway, that was a nice little quiz for you. Maybe there'll be Go on, John.
If you went to the education department one day, or and got lost in the corridors and asked a few people the way, you come out, you'd be an education advisor for 2 secretaries.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think if a school had that level of turnover in recent years of head teachers, I think Ofsted would probably be asking serious questions there. Don't you think?
Yeah,
I kind of always want to see. I mean, I know I sort of said I want to kind of see it happen, but I kind of, then you kind of, John almost kind of black mirrored me there, where he's like, he'll just sort of find his way in, he'll get kind of launched in, and then when I was, you can almost sort of see it in the future. So as much as I do kind of want to see what the young upstart can do, I also am acutely aware of what John said in that he will just kind of find his way into a nice cushy seat somewhere, and that'll be it'll just be another sort of story as old as time.
Yeah, the classic bird of passage. He's moving through quickly from university PP at Oxford to success later on, and there'll no doubt be a lot of money made on the way somehow if he hasn't made it already.
Possibly. Anyway, I thought that was a nice little. I thought that was a nice little quiz, just to throw you in for the summer
Sorry, we let
holidays.
you down, HB.
Well, there will be another one next week. Don't you worry. That may determine whether or not you're back on the panel next week. But, thank you to everybody who's listened to Teachers Talk Radio's weekly review. We've got shows every single day next week. It is the summer holidays, but we are still leading the education conversation. So thank you to Lucy and thank you to John. And without further ado, we shall bid you farewell. Take care. Goodbye.